us for our sixth session in our Interconnectivity of Character and Faith webinar series. We're excited and honored to welcome our presenter today, Dr. Nancy Winfrey. Dr. Winfrey is the Assistant Director for the Curriculum and Pedagogical Design Program for Leadership and Character in the Professional Schools at Wake Forest University School of Law. Throughout her over 25 years in education, Dr. Winfrey has worked with adults in nonprofit management, leadership development, and higher education. Today, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature to ask them. We're going to keep track of them, and at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have our presenter respond to them if the time allows. And additionally, at the close of the presentation on the final slide, we'll share a link for you to receive your certificate of completion for professional development hours for those of you joining us from GCU. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Winfrey.
Thanks, Ashley. That was quite an introduction. I wasn't expecting that. So I'll just skip the part where I tell everybody my name. But you've heard it and it's on the slide here. So what I want to do is talk about a framework to integrate character into your existing coursework. So not a module add-on, not a lot of redesigning your course. And I want to provide some context for where and why and how it was developed. So you get the sense of that. But then I want to shift to how we're using it here and what here means, and then how you might find it useful in whatever courses you're teaching at Grand Canyon. So we're going to do some contextualization. We're going to hear what our thoughts are on that. And then I'm sure there'll be time at the end for some questions. Although to be honest, I don't mind being interrupted. If something is just on your mind, you want to ask, please go ahead. I usually say that because I can't monitor the chat and talk, but since we have people paying attention to that, if you feel free to also type it in. Okay, so I'm at Wake Forest University, and let me get myself going here in the School of Law. And so Wake Forest University is a private liberal arts institution in North Carolina. It's beautiful. Not in the same way Grand Canyon is beautiful. It's a different kind of beautiful. But the motto for the whole institution is Pro Humanitate, which just means for humanity. And that's part of the strategic framework of the institution. And it really permeates a lot of what goes on here on campus. And so the program for leadership and character across the institution plays a large role in that. It's pretty innovative that we have also gotten ourselves embedded in the School of Law. We're the only law school in the country really that has an intentional initiative around developing character. So it's something kind of special, I think. Although the mission statement of the law school is to advance the cause of justice by creating knowledge, scholarship, educating students, coursework, to meet the legal needs of the world with confidence, character, and creativity. So it's in the mission statement. But I don't know that anybody can explain how exactly that happens. So that's kind of my job to operationalize the intentions this law school has into a way that's articulated, it's intentional, it's coherent throughout the 3 years of law school. And that we can actually say when our graduates walk across the stage in May, the Wake Forest lawyer will know what we mean by that. So that's what's going on here. There's nothing in the traditional law school curriculum that has anything to do with who you are. So we're trying to intervene in ways that bring that back. And it's not just important in the legal education system, but it's also really important in the profession of law and in legal systems, because you might agree that sometimes they have a bad reputation. Sometimes it's justified among the broader public, right? So just for example, low and declining levels of social trust for lawyers is real. Like they're way down there, kind of near used car salesmen, which is a bit unfortunate. And law students and practicing attorneys have disproportionately high rates of substance abuse, alcoholism, depression, suicide. And there's some research that points to law school as the beginning of some of these maladaptive behaviors. And so it's a kind of a big deal in this profession, and it's not a secret. The American Bar Association, which is kind of the governing body of legal education in the U.S., recently instituted some new criteria around professional identity, trying to mitigate some of these unfortunate behaviors. But the truth is, there's a really broad continuum of what that looks like, if it's even addressed at all, in law schools across the country. But at Wake Law, a focus on character is a priority, and not just timely nationally, but important in our school, and it's represented, supported pretty well. Our dean is all about it. I'm there embedded in the School of Law as a faculty-facing curricular person. I have a colleague who's a student-facing person, and I'm kind of the character girl. He's kind of the leadership guy. And he actually has a JD, and so he kind of knows what's going on, which is helpful to me. I'm just an educator. I'm the lone educator in the building. Um, but the way I see it, we have all kinds of attorneys, and we need some educators here. So that's my work, and there's a lot of work to do. So let's get on to this framework. It's called Wise Interventions, and I want to talk about how it works for us, and then we're going to talk about how it might be useful for you. First of all, I want to just give a little history on this term, wise interventions. So in the 50s and 60s at Berkeley, there's this pretty famous American sociologist named Irving Goffman, and he did a lot of really good work. But one of the things he talked about that's relevant here is this idea of being wise in reference to your relationships and how you engage with people, and especially if you were affirming of the rights of people who are gay, so straight people being supportive. And it's kind of a sense that you're wise to the social inequities that exist. And then in the 1990s, Claude Steele, who wrote Whistling Vivaldi, if you've read that, he's also a social psychologist and also from Berkeley. But he promoted this term wise schooling as a way to help teachers and professors, educators, understand stereotype threat in their minority students and how that affects their academic performance. And he had a lot to say and to write about that that was really helpful. I thought that was pretty good. And then building on that in the 2000s, um, Gregory Walton at Stanford and his colleagues started working on this idea of wise interventions as kind of a social psychological framework to help students um, reframe their negative perceptions of themselves. I can't do this work. I'm a failure. No, actually, that's pretty normal. Failure is a fundamental feature of learning, and everybody struggles in different ways. And so they're trying to help reframe these negative inferences and provide tools and resources for students to have more healthy sense of themselves and over time to for that to become recursive. Like, so if you think, well, everybody messes up on this, so I can, or I'm a person of girls aren't supposed to be good in math, right? And so there's extra pressure to be good in math. And so anyway, that was kind of his work there. So I really like that tradition of the word wise. And of course, that's a good word in any culture. And so it felt like a good fit for us here at Wake Forest. Not exactly in any of the ways that have seen it in the past, but I wanted to build on it because number one, it's kind of a nod to our Aristotelian program roots, where practical wisdom and a flourishing life is the goal, according to Aristotle. And so practical wisdom is a big deal around here. So this term wisdom kind of plays with that. The framework also depends on the wisdom of the professor who uses it. And in the law school, that's a good selling point. And I'll speak some more to that here in just a minute. And then finally, it makes a useful acronym. So here's a working definition of a wise intervention. And I've actually been talking a great deal. Does somebody who likes to read, would you mind reading this out loud while I have a drink of water?
I'll read it for you, Nancy. A wise intervention is a framework for designing short pedagogical interventions to embed character education within legal content. In this sense, we are intervening in the traditional separation of self and profession, engaging students in a holistic way, and shifting the trajectory of unhealthy professional habits toward a professional identity aligned with their sense of self. In other words, balancing the standard habits of mind, think like a lawyer, with dispositions of character, because who you are matters.
Thanks, Ashley.
Mhm.
Well, in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about. Um, so we're intervening in the sense that we're trying to the trajectory in law school is this is what you're going to do, but this is who you are, and it widens and widens until it's so disconnected that it's difficult to flourish in your profession as an attorney. Thanks. So back to that acronym. Um, W is why, I is immediate, S is specific, and E is engaging. And I want to just speak to those briefly, although they're pretty self-explanatory, but the why is for the teacher, for the educator. Why do you think a particular character trait, a particular value, a particular disposition is really important in the course you're teaching? In law, students are have a pretty high BS monitor. And so if the faculty member isn't really convinced that this is important, then the students will pick up on that. Plus, if you're not really authentic in something that you're doing, you're going to grow weary of it and it won't be sustainable. So the connection, the why, has to be really clear and meaningful to the educator. Immediate means that it's timely, it's in the moment that is connected to the coursework. And so, it's not explicitly stated, but really law school is about passing the bar. And so a student would rightly say, why do I have to talk about this? Is this going to help me pass the bar? Um, the answer is no, it's not going to help you pass the bar, but it's going to help you survive being a lawyer and have a good life, right? So it's got to be in the moment that it's so relevant that nobody can argue with the fact that you're bringing it up, right? So specific means that you're targeting your students in your course with strategies that are tailored to what you know their knowledge is or their skill level or their development and the trajectory of law school that's really specific to your context. And then engaging just means that it's an interactive intervention. So students have to contextualize, do the meaning making work. Um, it's not enough to say in lecture and criminal procedure. And this is a situation where you should be empathetic with your client and then go right on lecturing. Okay. That just goes in one ear, not the other. So we want to stop and engage students for just a minute with whatever character trait that you're trying to engage. So let me just give you an example in law, and then we'll move on to some other kinds of examples. So there's a course called Legal Writing for Judicial Chambers. You probably all know all about it. And so I worked with a professor who teaches this class, and we're looking through here her syllabus to look for places for interventions. And I first asked her, what character traits do you think would support a person who is a clerk of court? That's what we're talking about here, clerks of court. And she wasn't quite sure. And I said, well, clerks of court, that's a very prestigious position right out of law school. I mean, that's the best of the best that get these clerkships. It's a kind of a big deal. So I know she's got, preparing students for a very important task. And so this is a writing course. So she's explained to me in the syllabus, they get to a point where they research and they write a memo. I didn't know this, but a young clerk does all the work to prepare a document that informs the judge's decision. I guess I just thought judges sat up there and just knew everything. I don't know. So they write this as a standard memo. There's a certain way you write it, and they learn how to write this memo. So they have to do all the research, the rules of law, the precedents that have been set prior, the statutes that are applicable, the stakeholders in the case. They do all this work, they give it to the judge. The judge reads it, they pronounce their verdict or their ruling on the case. And then the next job the clerk has is to write the opinion document, which is a public-facing piece, and that goes into the pool of precedent that other people will look at later. And I'm like, okay, that makes all sense. And then Professor Graham, who I was speaking with, said,
Yeah,
sometimes the
I really
judge
didn't have anything
rules the
aside from
opposite.
saying that. So if that gets moved and this meeting is,
Ooh, Ashley, thank you. Um, so sometimes a judge rules the opposite of what the clerk has written in the memo. And now the clerk has to write this public opinion just as professionally when they totally think it's the wrong decision to make, right? And I was like, wow, I bet they hate that. And Professor Graham says, oh yeah, they hate it. It's really hard. And I said, boom, there's your moment for a wise intervention. Okay. Um, can you take 5 minutes at this point in your day and surface this reality, maybe name it, provide a strategy for your students, so that they can grapple with it in a safe space of your classroom, as opposed to encountering it and dealing with it for the first time on their own as a clerk. Because if your sense of what's right and just is rubbing up against the work that you're doing on a regular basis, no wonder you drink on the weekends. So we don't want our students going there. Um, so so I gave her lots of ideas of what she could do in a 5 or 10 minute space there. And this is a wise intervention because number one, Professor Graham knows this is going to happen. So it's dependent on her wisdom of the law practice that she's equipping students to do. And so she knows it's important. So she knows her why. And it's going to be surfaced at the moment the students are feeling the rub. Oh my gosh, that's not going to be fun. And it's specific because she's going to help them think through what it could be like. In this case, for these students, when they have to do these writing assignments as a clerk. And then it's engaging because she's going to take 5 minutes and put them to work. For example, she could simply pass out a worksheet with an emotion chart and help students to pinpoint, be a little self-aware of how they're feeling in this moment. Like what is it exactly that's going through my mind? She could ask them to name a feeling, describe it in their own words, and speculate how they would deal with that in the judge's chambers when it comes up. She could ask them to write what character trait they think would be important to develop and leverage in these situations. They can name it, they could define it, they could write it on a 5x7 card as an exit ticket from class. She could prompt them to reflect and discuss how they would leverage this in the moment. What do they think would be supportive? What do they expect might be a hindrance? They could write them a note to self for themselves with a possible future strategy when this happens. They could share their notes with a peer, get more ideas. That also promotes some accountability to the task. She could play a short video of a clerk describing this situation happening and how they felt and what they did. So like a real person that's doing this work. Whatever you're comfortable with and as much time as you can allot. I said, pick something that will work and just try it. So I'm not asking faculty to be advocates for character development in a prescriptive way. And I'm not asking them to be experts in the affective learning domain. I'm not asking them to be a psychologist or a counselor. What I'm asking them to do is to create a space and a process for students to do their own interior work, okay? And in short, strategically positioned moments. So that's a wise intervention, what it means and an example of it. And so I want to share how we're using it. So at Wake Law, we're doing this project over 4 semesters. We're halfway through. And so what I've done is invite faculty to be in a small group to work on this for 1 semester and to generate 1 to 3 5 to 10 minute interventions. That's all. And we meet 4 times. So we meet before the semester starts, we meet twice during, and then once after. So really what I'm doing is creating little communities of practice where they are talking about ideas and helping each other and sharing, how this worked. I didn't like it, whatever. That was a bust. Oh, this was awesome. Just that just kind of like action research, the cycles that we go through there. So I had 3 faculty participate in the fall. I had 16 faculty participate this spring, and we have 2 more semesters to go. I'm also collecting data. And so we are having faculty, and actually this is some accountability for faculty too. What are you doing? What did you hope would happen? What did happen? What did you learn? And so on. And I really think this is helping our faculty realize that it's not that difficult, but you have to be intentional and you have to be clear about what you're doing. So I really love, this is Heather Graham's example here and what she learned, which is the last column in this chart here. We talked about intellectual humility, accepting criticism and guidance, and the importance of continuing to learn. I was reminded again how afraid of failure my students are. I was like, wow, they really need some of the interior work that helps them be resilient and confident and just, develop the character that they need and the person they want to be a successful and healthy attorney. So our law school has really high graduation rates, high bar passage rates, high employment rates. But what we need is an intentional and coherent approach to educating confidence, character, and creativity, because that's what we promise our students. We don't want them to become statistics. So I have some faculty reflections at this midpoint to share with you. And somebody let me know if you can't hear this well.
The reason why I wanted to participate is so that I could intentionally teach about some of the character traits that I think are critical to practicing law today with integrity and impact.
I'm generally supportive of the leadership and character project here at the law school and among the graduate schools. I just think it's a really important aspect of people's identity formation as professionals. And it's really an important aspect in one's job as a lawyer, and one that is underdeveloped in law schools. So that's why I participated in this project, because I wanted to be part of the solution to that by incorporating more of these things in the classroom.
What I found useful about the WISE framework is it gives a name to things that we want to do, and it provides a template and a step-by-step process to intentionally consider what I am doing in the classroom, what character traits I'm hoping to elicit from the exercise, and then to look at the results and see whether they were successful, not successful, and how I can improve that the following year.
If I can use the WISE framework and let me introduce exercises into the classroom in a subtle way that helps students engage in self-discovery about their values and character. No matter how many times you might say something, especially when it relates to character, students don't actually internalize something until they have the opportunity to reflect on it and recognize it themselves.
But to see them sort of open up to the ideas of talking about, what their values are, sort of interpersonal relationships, how those might affect the practice of law.
And then to talk together in groups of two and compare notes and, suggest changes to one another's lists and notes, and then to move to a larger group of 6 or 8 and to start to talk not so much about what's the right answer, but have there been generational changes to the answers to these questions? That series of questions has impressed me with the way that it brings real honesty and insight out of into the discussion from my students.
What I learned about my students and myself in the process was that they took it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, the conversations with my colleagues and with Nancy in particular has been really helpful in a number of different ways. If I had only done my own interventions, my purview might have been sort of more narrow, but these conversations have opened it up and spurred me to think bigger thoughts.
And we are always engaging. So if we can go through the WISE framework and say, do we have each one? I find that incredibly useful for class planning as a group.
It's nice to see how our curriculum as a whole comes together to create these students, to create these lawyers. And so for each of the little interventions, then it's our little pieces that are put together in this puzzle of these great lawyers.
One thing that one student did say that I wanted to share was that this class demonstrated that a lot of leadership and character comes down to doing the right thing at the right time. I could not feel better about that.
So Aristotle says, developing practical wisdom is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons and consistently over time, which is a lot. But for a student to figure out some of that, we were all quite encouraged by that. So there are some faculty talking about their experience using this. We have 2 more semesters to do it, but already a lot of these faculty are planning to continue meeting and continue talking about this going forward. So that's pretty exciting. Well, you could rightly say that's all well and good, but I teach biology, so that's fair. But it's fine because this is a process framework. You can use the language and the resources that are most familiar to you and that fit the best with your course material. So for example, you can use the scriptures. You can use Jesus as an exemplar. You can use the Pauline letters, and you could talk about the connection between Paul's directive to the church at Rome don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So what has that got to do with being mindful? And why would a sociologist need to be mindful? What character traits would support that grounding in that behavior? You can use the application of Proverbs. I mean, Solomon wrote the very first line that they're useful for gaining wisdom and instruction in the NIV. So there's a lot of resources there and language there that you could feasibly utilize in your class. Or you might really like the Aristotelian approach and the virtue language. And you could talk about the golden mean. Aristotle talks about character as a balance between two extremes. So courage is in the balance of recklessness and cowardness. So what does it mean to be courageous? What does it mean to live a balanced life in the business world where there's lots of pressure and things change very quickly? How does a counselor develop the practical wisdom of doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons and overtime so that they can share that in an authentic way with their clients? You could use popular or discipline-specific materials. So what strengths do you lean on? And what strengths would you like to develop? And what supports do you think would be useful for you in your career to leverage these strengths? What hindrances do you anticipate being the person that you want to be in the job that you want to have? What are the strengths that are useful as a mathematician? What would a historian want to, develop? So, and you can also use the values in action. This is a classification of character strengths, and you could use character language. There's a free online assessment that you can use as a baseline, maybe for self-awareness with your students, and then throughout the semester, build on some strengths that they choose that they want to develop. And you could certainly talk about why would a biologist need to develop curiosity? Why would an artist be concerned about appreciation of excellence and beauty? And then how do these character traits apply to you in the field that you want to go into, right? So there's a lot of ways to use the framework, and you just have to choose something that will work for you as an educator, for the course that you're teaching, and for who your students are. So let's contextualize. What I want to do is take some time, like probably 15 minutes, and I'll open up some breakout rooms. And what I want you to do is just talk to your colleagues about this framework and could you use it? How would you use it? Why would you use it? Why would you not use it? Whatever your thoughts are in the moment. And then we'll just hear a sampling of some of what you've talked about so we get a sense of what everybody thinks and feels about it. So I'm going to open up rooms for 3 people and set my timer for 15 minutes. But before I do that, I want to know what your questions are about what I'm asking you to do. I'm going to take silence as affirmation that everybody's paying attention and it's super clear. So we've got rooms here. I'm going to send you an invitation to your breakout room. If nobody shows up in your room, just hang tight for a second and I will move you to a space where there's somebody, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Hey, Allison, do you need help getting to your room?
Well, I went to my room and I was the only one in there.
Oh, Andy sent his
No?
AI note taker, whatever that is. Okay.
Yeah.
Andy, are you good? Are you planning to go to your room? Can you hear me? He must be doing something else.
I'm sorry, I am doing something else. I do not think I'm going to go to a room.
Okay. Allison, let's get you somewhere here where you can have a conversation.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
just going to move you to the other room, so that'll just happen automatically. It'll take just a second. Allison, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I don't see your maybe I can just move you from where you are. Let me try that.
Okay, let me join. Thank
Great.
you.
Sure. Fast talkers are back early. Well, everybody will be back in a minute. Okay.
Hey,
Well,
Kay.
welcome back. So I'd love to hear some of the conversations that were useful. I'm very curious about this framework in other contexts, and so I'd like some feedback um, in terms of how it might be useful or what you guys talked about or, other ideas, just whatever. The mic,
Okay.
the open mic.
Okay. Allison, do you want to take it? We sort of elected Allison our spokesperson.
Oh, how good. Okay.
So, in our breakout group, we discussed how this framework can be implemented maybe somewhat differently depending on what course you teach.
Mhm.
For example, Alexis was talking about she teaches web design and she does a lot of research. And so there are ways to integrate that into her courses and into research. And especially, it would be very useful with younger students to ground them in research, well, to ground them morally in their courses. And Justina teaches the education, the EDD courses. And so that is going to be somewhat different because some of her doctoral courses only has one or two students at a time. So that would be integrated differently.
Mhm.
And in terms of, I teach elementary teachers to become reading specialists. And so this is almost integrated naturally whenever an adult is teaching a child to read. And
Mhm.
so it's integrated already because of the opportunity and the type of, well, teaching someone to read is astounding. It is amazing and it'll change someone's life. So most teachers already have those types of traits intrinsically.
Mhm.
And of course, other aspects of the bureaucracy, social media, our social environment, of course, changes people. But that's just those are some of the things that we discussed in our breakout room.
That's so interesting. Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome.
And you make an important point. A lot of times we're modeling no matter what, right? No matter what we're teaching and no matter who we are. So we want to be intentional about it, but there's oftentimes where we're doing these things and it might be helpful to name them or to be intentional or to be consistent, right? Um, so that's a really good point. And I also was thinking when you were talking about Alexis teaching research, one of the women in the video I shared is a research librarian here, and she teaches resilience a lot to her students because they can't find what they need and they give up and they're used to having somebody fix the problems in some cases. And so that's just, it seemed
Yeah.
important to her to teach resilience and also integrity when you're
Oh,
reporting on research, when you're sharing it, like who gets to hear it, what do they get to hear, who funds it, are
yeah.
you being honest about the data that you're choosing to highlight, those kinds of things?
Yeah,
So I was,
well,
yeah.
yeah. I was just going to say, I teach web design and development, various aspects of web design and development, but I incorporate a lot of research
Mm,
into those courses. And what you're saying very much applies, and particularly in these days where artificial intelligence is becoming a lot more prevalent. And in any technological course, we talk about AI, and its ethical implications are very much getting a lot of attention, and deservedly so. Um, so
Yeah, great, thanks. So what else went down? What can you share that the whole group can learn from?
in our group,
Oh, well, no, that wasn't a direct question to you, Alexis. That was to the all the other bodies in the room.
oh, okay, cool.
Happy to talk a little bit about some of the things we discussed. It was me and Emily and Michaela, and we honed in on the first two words of the acronym mostly, the why and the um, need for it to be immediate, and talked through ways to capitalize on those things in order to have our students, for all of us, we were talking more in terms of like our online opportunities with students through like discussion prompts and ways to ourselves do this and also encourage other instructors that we work with to do this to help our students really focus on that why it matters in their context and why they are applying it in their immediate context, not just to their future career. That when they can reflect on how it matters now, then it sinks in more deeply, and they can obviously still use it as they think about their future career, but that only thinking about it in terms of a future career does not have the same impact as having an immediate response to their context right then. So, Emily and Michaela, feel free to jump in with other things we talked about. That was just a couple.
Well, those are really great points. And I especially like what you talked about, helping them grounded in their experience right now. So it's more sticky, right? I mean, our law students think they're going to be fine, do everything perfectly, and it's not going to be any problem. And why are we even talking about this? But we know in the real world, it's difficult. And so that's a really great point. Find ways for them to, maybe they're not haven't encountered. Maybe they think they'll be fine as a clerk of court, but what happened this semester that you really hated? What happened in what class or with your friends that you really hated? And then how did you handle that, right? So that's immediate. And they have something to work with. That's a really great point. Thank you. Anything else we want to hear? Does anybody have a particular question or a comment or just something they want to put into the milieu here in our last couple minutes?
I have a comment, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Oh, because I was asking you about what the main points were, because when I was talking to Mark, I believe it was kind of hypotheticals that we were going for. And I have to have a specific scenario. But what I would say is that I think that there's a lot of times there's a distinction that is made often in good faith between what we are, the way what we believe, the way we have been raised. I'm sorry, I have problems with my camera today, so
that's fine.
I apologize.
We hear you.
But basically, and what we're supposed to implement in the classrooms. And sometimes it's not really an issue in that way, because, for example, for me, and I'm pretty sure for the majority of people here, it's a continuum of the way we are anyway. So I don't have to switch persona when I'm in the classroom. There's always opportunity for growth by all means, and I always integrate other points of view. But I cannot really make a clear distinction because for some things come out of second nature for me. So in order to actually discuss something, I would have to have some type of case scenario, and also because I've been teaching in other university a variety of courses. So also the approach has to be adapted to the content and to the type of class that we have. I am also an interpreter and translator, and so I have to be sensitive to that, whether it comes to communication or problem solving or even to inspire people. But I just wanted to contribute that because it seems like it is a little bit challenging to have to define specifically different characteristics or points when it's part of the way we are. That's the way we would do things anyway, if it makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. Well, it sounds like you show up
Thank
as
you.
an authentic educator, and I'm sure that your students appreciate that. So I appreciate. Okay, well,
Thank
what
you.
I'm going to do, if we don't have anything else, is share my screen for one last time. So you can, I don't see the green. Why didn't it show up? There we go. So there's your QR code, and Emily probably wants to say a little something before we all leave. But I do want to say thank you so much for taking out an hour of your life to talk about this and to engage with it a little bit. And I hope that you find something useful going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winfrey, for such an informative and thought-provoking presentation. We, of course, appreciate your time and experience and your expertise. For all who are still on, our next presentation in the Canyon Center for Character Education's Interconnectivity of Character and Faith webinar series will occur in conjunction with our LOPES conference. It's on May 8th at 10 a.m. when we will welcome Dr. Mike Severtson, principal at Yonker High School in Buckeye, Arizona. I'll share the registration link in the chat, and we hope to see you there. And we also encourage you to explore our resources. And those of you joining us from GCU, we encourage you to obtain your certificate of completion for attending today. We'll also put those links in the chat. And that would be all. Thank you again, Nancy. We appreciate you so much.
I'm sure. I'm trying to share my screen, but it keeps not coming up.
I'm going to put all these things in the chat so they'll have them there. They don't need to use the QR codes.
Okay. Thanks.
There you are. They are there in the chat, everybody.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Sure. It was great. Thanks for coming.